Welcome back to this episode of Popcorn Diaries, where we kick off the new year with a very special episode that's actually going to be split into 4 different parts. The reason for that being is you can't fit James Bond into 10 minutes.
Nope, no way.
James Bond is our topic of the month of January, so all month long we're going to be talking about Bond, the cars, the girls, gadgets, characters, the story, where it has gone. So for this first episode, we're going to start off with cars, gadgets, and girls. We won't be able to hit every single one, but we will hit our top favorites. So let's kick it off, Joe. Talk about the first car in our list.
Well, when it comes to James Bond, it's all about cars. They've always picked iconic cars, performance cars, if you will, cars that we all wish we had.
True.
And starting out with early James Bond with Sean Connery, of course, you got to start off with the Aston Martin Db5. This is probably the most recognized car in the James Bond series. It has been in, I believe, 6 films: Goldfinger, Thunderball, Goldeneye, Tomorrow Never Dies, Casino Royale, World Is Not Enough, and it appears in Skyfall, the latest James Bond movie. This car is probably most known for all the gadgets that were built into it that were brought out in Goldfinger. We're talking about the ejector roof. We're talking about the things that come out of the wheels that grind up cars, the machine guns, the oil slick, the ejector seat, on and on and on. This car was just absolutely loaded, and for the time period that this came out in the mid-'60s, it was by far the coolest car on the planet.
Yeah, it was pretty much one of the coolest cars you could ever see. One of the nifty features that I thought was very ahead of its time was the global positioning system. So you had like a GPS in that car.
Yeah, it was built into the dashboard with a little round screen.
Right, and it had the little radar hidden in
beep,
one of the headlights.
Beep, beep.
Yeah.
Yep,
This gadget was miles ahead of its time, which is one thing that does happen a lot in the James Bond series. We do see a lot of technology that was way ahead of its time and then got realized much later within the series, but that is definitely a great car to start off with. And then we follow it up with the Aston Martin Dbs, another of the Aston Martin line that came out on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it was also featured in Casino Royale. It was the one car that Daniel Craig totaled in Casino Royale. Brought tears to my eyes. This car is a beautiful performance vehicle. It was in production from 1967 to 72 with the first DBS, and then the 2008 version was the one that we saw in Casino Royale. This was also the car that Tracy, Bond's very short-lived wife, died in. So this was the car that she was killed in. Sad moment for James Bond. This car had all the same type of gadgets from Q Branch that were brought about and talked about, but they didn't actually show any of these. The only ones that we do get to see is in the 2008 version with the Casino Royale. We see the hidden compartment where he has the defibrillator and then he has the injections. Those are the only real gadgets we saw with this DBS.
Yeah, this is a great car. A big fan of it in Casino Royale, of course, because they wreck it. We're talking about a $300,000 car. I believe they wrecked 3 of them filming the sequence. It holds the Guinness Book of World Records for most rollovers. I believe is 7 times. You just can't ask for a better car wreck in this movie. It's a shame they wrecked 3 of them, but I think it was well worth it.
What you got next for me, Joe?
Moving on to Roger Moore and the cars that he drove. Of course, none of us will forget in the movie The Spy Who Loved Me, the White Lotus that turned into the submarine. This is probably one of the most recognizable cars from the entire Bond franchise, second only to the original DB5. What could be cooler than a car that just drives off that dock and just falls into the water and the wheels fold up and then the props come out and this thing starts going through the water and everything like that. Ultra cool. I remember seeing this as a kid and I just died when I saw this.
So let's move on. Tomorrow Never Dies came out with the BMW 750iL. This car was actually the most heavily gadgeted vehicle for Bond's missions. It had ballistic bulletproof armored body panels, bulletproof and impact-proof glass all around, although it did not withstand the grenade projectile fired from the rifle launcher. It had many compartments, many different gadgets that were installed. But one of the greatest things, other than the security system that it had that was amazing, was that Bond was actually able to drive this car via his Ericsson mobile phone. So he jumped in the back of this vehicle, and there he is. We see him driving around from behind the backseat of this vehicle.
Yeah.
He is just having so much fun taking out the bad guys. Bad guys are driving around trying to catch up with him. It's just so amazing. I love this part of this film. There's one moment where he's swinging the car around, and Pierce Brosnan's got this look on his face like he's a kid in a candy store. It's so amazingly hilarious. But if I was in the back of that vehicle doing what he was doing, I'd have the same look on my face.
Yeah, there's no doubt that this is the highlight of the film with this car. I agree with you. Him sitting in the back seat, it looks like he's got a Game Boy in his hand, and he's just got this smirk on his face, and he is definitely having fun in this scene. And I bet when they were filming this, it was everything they could do to have him keep a straight face. Now, we're sorry, folks, we couldn't hit on all the wonderful cars that are out there, because there's many, many more that were used either in a major or a minor role throughout the movies. And you know which cars they are, because I think we all have our favorites, no doubt. So that being said, shall we move on to other vehicles?
Yeah, we did see quite a few other vehicles. One of my favorites is actually one of the villain vehicles, the Rolls-Royce Phantom 3.
Oh, from
which Goldfinger's favorite car.
Yeah.
So this was driven by Oddjob. This is just such a beautiful classic car. One of the great things that I thought was funny about this particular Rolls-Royce is the license plate, which is AU1, which is the periodic table symbol for gold.
Yeah.
Goldfinger was always obsessed with gold, so even his license plates were a throwback to gold.
Yeah, great choice. I thought one of the neatest things about this car in the movie of Goldfinger was it turned out that was the way he was smuggling his gold, because they were making the entire car and all the body panels and everything out of gold. So that was pretty cool to learn that in the movie, that's how he was doing his smuggling and so on and so forth. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite vehicles that was used in the Bond franchise had to be in the movie Goldeneye, and that would be the T-55 tank.
Ooh.
That he runs around
Yeah.
St. Petersburg in. What can you say about this? He jumps in the tank and just starts chasing, the car, and the chase seems to go on forever. It's down the streets, it's through alleyways, it's through buildings. And who hasn't wanted at some point in time to be able to drive a tank, knowing you can run over anything and it's not going to change? It's just going to keep going, and so on and so forth. Great scene there. Tidbits on that: it took them 6 weeks to film that relatively short chase scene. It is a real Russian T-55 tank that they used from the East England Military Museum. They did modify it a little bit so that it could run on the street with rubber pads instead of the steel pads. They didn't want to destroy the street and all that.
Yeah, that was definitely a memorable moment to see Bond jump in this huge tank and drive it like a sports vehicle. So we're done with our vehicles. Let's move on to some gadgets. I mean, you can't talk about Bond without talking about gadgets.
Yeah, it's all about gadgets. The cars are great, and there's other things and the locations and so on and so forth. But what it really comes down to is the gadgets. We could go on and on forever talking about gadgets, because there's literally hundreds of gadgets. So we just picked a couple of our favorites that we thought were worth talking about. So, Adriana, what's on your list for gadgets?
This is probably one of my favorite gadgets. It's actually his Attache Case. And this came out early on in the Bond series. So this thing was fully loaded. It had flat throwing knife that popped out of the side. It had a 3-piece AR-7 folding sniper rifle. Now, this was such a beautiful case. It even had a strap full of 50 gold sovereigns.
Yeah, it had the gold coins in it,
which he did try to use to bribe one of the henchmen. And it also had an ordinary can of talcum powder that had tear gas. So if you tried to open his attaché case, it would explode in your face, which he actually did use to great effect during the movie. This was a beautiful little thing that Q put together for him.
Yeah, the briefcase could arguably be the number one gadget, if you will, because it just had so much, and it was believable. I mean, it looked like a briefcase. Everything was hidden in there, so it wasn't something that was, outlandish like a laser cutter watch or something like that. But speaking of convincing gadgets, going into Goldeneye, if you remember the exploding pen that he was given from Q. I think if you hit it 3 times, it would go off.
In 4 seconds.
In 4 seconds. And if you remember Boris, one of the bad guys, he was...
sitting there clicking.
He was sitting there clicking this thing all the time in the control room, and you're just sitting there counting, going, was that 3? Was that 3? Was that 3? Was that 3? And waiting for that thing, and it finally does, obviously, explode. So I always thought that the pen grenade was very, very cool.
Simple, elegant, sleek, and worked.
Yep.
It was a great gadget that he used to good effect, took down the whole building with it. And we can't finish off this episode without talking about the other important aspect of Bond's life, and that's the women.
Yeah, Bond girls.
Oh, Bond girls. There have been so many, whether they've been good, whether they've been bad, or whether we just not like them. So Joe and I picked the best of the worst, the best of the best, and the one we couldn't stand. So Joe, kick it off. Who was your best of the worst?
Well, it was early on in Bond movies that we knew or saw that, there was going to be girls in this. You have a spy who's running around with gadgets and fancy cars that does all kind of things, and he was definitely a playboy type, and girls came along for the ride. I got to go with Dr. No, the character of Honey Rider, who was played by Ursula Andress. She comes out of the ocean when they're there on the beachfront, and she comes up singing and so on and so forth. And Bond just stands there and looks at her. And this was, I think, our first showing that, these aren't going to be regular girls. These are going to be showcase girls. And these parts of Bond girls throughout the years have been highly contested for people to be a Bond girl. Because once you are, you're known for life as a Bond girl. I really liked the way Ursula Andress played her part, and I thought she was perfect. The way they cast her, and as the naive island girl collecting shells, and she ends up ultimately helping Bond out of his fix that he has there on the island of Dr. No. Interesting about Ursula, her entire dialogue was dubbed. She does not speak a single word because her accent was too heavy. It was a heavy Swiss accent. And so they had someone else dub her all the way through. And if you look close, you can't pick it up. They did a pretty good job of it.
No, they did actually do a pretty good job of dubbing her voice in. She was definitely one of the most iconic of the Bond girls. That white bikini just became synonymous with Bond. Yeah. So my best of the best was the best of both worlds, which was Vesper Lynd from Casino Royale, played by Eva Green. She was a British Treasury agent. She was one of my favorites. She let Bond have it, She really did. But what I really loved about her character was that it went back to that feminine era. Everything that we saw from Daniel Craig's era with Casino Royale and on, we've seen a return to the classic Bond, a return to the classic vehicles, a return to not heavily gadgeted movies. The stunts are believable. They're not so over the top that you're just like, well, I don't know how they pulled this off.
Yep.
But they not only did that with the story, the stunts, and the gadgets, they also did it with the women. So Vesper is kind of the best of both worlds. She ultimately tried to help Bond, but and at the same time betrayed him. She was feminine, but she let him have it. She didn't need to throw a punch. She didn't need to kick the villain's butt. She just let him have it with words, and you can tell that he was taken a little aback by her.
Yeah, no doubt.
So some of the dialogue between them is just amazing. That little interplay of wit and sarcasm, that whole train scene when they're talking together.
Definitely my favorite scene.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just the way they go at each other. And she comes out on top. She does.
Yeah, that is an excellent scene where she starts pretty much challenging him, about his heritage. And, he grew up and he was an orphan and, went to Cambridge and so on. Oh, man, she just spoons it out. And he's just like sitting there like, man, she's ripping me up.
The dinner jacket.
Yeah.
The dinner jacket.
Yeah.
She is the only Bond woman to ever question Bond's style.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I thought was a great little tidbit.
Yeah, and when he comes out with with that dinner jacket on, he just looks
amazing.
He does. He is probably the best looking Bond, in that type of an outfit. Admittedly, I can't go on without talking about Goldeneye and Natalia Simonova. She was, if you remember, she was the Bond girl that was with the bad guys in the beginning in the Goldeneye facility. But as the movie goes on, she turns out to be a good guy. I think what really appealed to me most about her was, she was a beautiful woman, but she was always acting tough like a guy. I mean, she was willing to jump here, get blown up here, and everything like that. And she was another one of those characters that questioned, Bond, what are you doing? And not just going around, going along for the ride as eye candy, if you will. There's that wonderful exchange between her and Bond where she says, did you destroy every vehicle you're in? And he said standard operating procedures or something like that. And then she goes, what is it with you guys and moving vehicles? Because
Boys
they always
with their toys.
Yeah, because they always wreck everything. And so she was a favorite. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy watching Goldeneye so much.
So she was definitely a great character. My best of the worst actually comes from Goldeneye as well.
Oh, really? Okay.
Zinnia Zaragevna Onotov.
Yeah, I think you have that right. Yeah.
Now, she was one of the best Bond villain girls. Oh, my God, I love this woman. She just portrayed by Famke Janssen, former fighter pilot for the Soviet Air Force, ex-KGB operative, and she is now an assassin. Yeah. I mean, and just her performance throughout this whole movie was consistent. There wasn't a time where she wasn't beating somebody up that she looked like she was having a good time.
Yeah, she was just nasty throughout.
She was nasty from the moment we first see her to the end when she dies.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Having to pick the Bond girl I find least appealing, if that's the way to say it. We might actually agree on this one. And I'm going to have to pick Jane Seymour, who played Solitaire. Oh, what a performance. I'm sorry, I just can't buy into it.
No.
It just wasn't there for me. It was hard to watch this movie with her in it and the tarot cards and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, folks. They should have thought twice before they cast her.
Her defining dialogue is pick a card. Come on.
Yeah.
There wasn't really much to her character other than I read tarot card. But this character was just, I couldn't connect with it at all.
Yeah, terribly miscast in my opinion.
Definitely, we both agree on this one. This is one of the first times we agree on,
yes,
on
it
much.
Is. And if you get a chance, folks, stop by Studio 300 here at the Fountaindale Library. We have all kinds of Bond stuff posted on the wall, all kinds of really neat pictures and things like that of all the things that you can think of Bond. So it's pretty cool. On our next episode of Popcorn Diaries, we're going to be covering all the James Bonds and all the actors that played those wonderful parts. And we're going to be talking about all the villains that came along for the ride with them. So please stand by. So we'll see you next time on Popcorn Diaries. I'm Joe.